Welcome. This is David Boles, Human Meme. Today's topic, Journal Squared Live. During the first 3 years of our young marriage, 30 years ago, Jana and I moved a total of 8 times. We were pros at moving and packing and getting ready at a moment's notice. We could stuff our entire lives into 10 milk crates. 10 milk crates we unwittingly stole from the Eastern Market Metro stop in Washington, D.C. Now, we thought the milk crates were throwaways when we learned much later they were only stacked on the curb, ready for recycling. Then, after many years of education and moving a few times, we stabilized our lives a bit, and we sat down for 17 years in the Jersey City Heights in New Jersey. We always maintained and still do a lot of businesses in New York City, and that tradition of cooperation between New York and New Jersey lives within us and between us. We live in New York City and we sleep in Jersey City. And when I say Journal Squared Live as the topic of this Human Meme podcast, I mean this is the first podcast from my new location in the Hilltop neighborhood in Jersey City, New Jersey, all recorded for you live on tape, digitally, for your listening enjoyment. So, as you may remember as a fan of this Human Meme podcast, after the flood in our old apartment, and you can find that podcast by going to humanmeme.com and doing a search on flood, and you'll learn about the viciousness of water against an electronic life. We decided it was high time to finally up and move out, and so we did. And moving is a lot easier to do when your old landlord owes you over $10,000 in water damages and will not pay you a cent. Not one bleeding penny. When it's all his fault. And so we moved exactly 0.6 miles northwesterly into the new mega monolithic building called Journal Squared 1. You can find it online by going to journalsquared.com. And right now, don't look for it on Apple Maps or on Google Maps because you're going to see nothing. This is a brand new building. It's huge. It touches the sky. Over 50 stories of white facade holding 586 apartments. And my podcasting friend, there are 2 more monster buildings being built. Journal Squared 2 and 3, planned for the same site to be built over the next few years. And yes, this is a Jared Kushner building. And I'm no absolutist when it comes to politics and living and earning. But there is no doubt the land upon which I am now standing and speaking to you and sleeping with my wife and sitting here making this Human Meme podcast was an empty, barren lot for at least 15 years. Developer after developer could not get anything built on this site, to the consternation of the entirety of Jersey City. But now, after the Kushners bought the land and took over the project, 2 years later, we have this beautiful building with every amenity and success. And Jared Kushner sold his interest in the Kushner Group when he went to Washington, D.C. with his wife Ivanka and her father, Donald Trump. But the residue of his success still sticks to this building. The Kushners saw this empty space before it was conceived, and they built their dream. And no matter what you believe or who you support in politics, that sort of vision dreaming counts for something. And it means everything. There is a definite aesthetic here of form creating function that everyone must abide because it cannot be denied. And I can tell you from direct experience that this building, if it stood in Manhattan, would easily cost $10,000 a month in rent for our apartment. And as it stands here in Jersey City, we only pay about a third of that. So if you have Manhattan luxury living in Jersey City, and in Jersey City you only live 12 minutes away from Manhattan via train, it all begins to make sense economically. And yes, it's also true that living in Jersey City is about half as expensive as living in New York City. Food, utilities, transportation, entertainment. All are almost always half the price of New York City. 12 minutes away. Oh, and as a side note to this Human Meme podcast, speaking of living, because I see so much value and interest in this new Journal Squared project that is only 1/3 complete, I pitched the idea of a podcast to the Kushner Group for a podcast called Journal Squared Live that would share conversations with designers, building staff, and residents, and I would be the host. So keep an ear open for a Journal Squared Live podcast coming soon to an ear near you. Now here's the most interesting thing about Journal Squared 1 that to me, as an old guy from the Midwest, I find confounding as a resident in this new monolithic building created perhaps for millennials. First, the elevators. There are no buttons to push. There's a touch screen outside the elevators you use to summon an elevator. You punch in your floor and an elevator arrives. And when your assigned elevator arrives, you get in and you get lost up on the floor you chose. And you cannot change your destination once you are inside the elevator. There are no buttons to push inside the elevator. And in some ways, I guess it's sort of good that nobody in the hallway can try to run and hold up your elevator from the outside. Because where they're going, because their floor will not be programmed into your ride in the system. That rude person will just have to wait and punch in their floor as expected, and they will have to wait for the right elevator to show up to scoop them upward. I also understand many modern buildings do not have a 13th floor. Is superstition a millennial thing or a universal human truth? And Journal Squared 1 is no different. We have no 13th floor. There's a slight angling up from the 12th floor to the 14th floor. So I guess no unlucky 13th floor has to exist or to be punched into an elevator keypad. Even though a 13th floor does exist, it's just labeled the 14th floor. What fascinates me is that we have a 44th floor. And if you know anything about Chinese numerology, 4 in any form, pronounced in English, sounds like the word for death in Chinese. And so I don't imagine there will be many Chinese numerology fans who would choose to live on the death floor. But maybe that's just my wild, meandering mind at play. We also have no intercom system. This one confused me. How do we communicate with the front desk, or get alarms, or communicate beyond our memes? Well, I guess the idea is you just use your phone. Your phone is now your intercom. If you need a notification of a package delivery, you'll get an SMS or an email, or both if you're old and cautious like me. And if there's a problem, you'll get a call from the concierge desk. There's no need for a building intercom or a communication system when you already have one in your hand, right? Finally, the 8th floor is amazing. Nobody lives there, but everybody lives there. The 8th floor is 10,000 square feet of fun. A swimming pool, yoga and spinning room, gym, library, kids' room, a lounge, movie room, terrace, kitchen. You get the idea. And I've come to understand the idea of the 8th floor is one of being an extension of your apartment. You sleep in your apartment, and you do everything else on the 8th floor. It's a community. I get it. It works. And if you're an old man like me, it's lovely knowing you have at least 5 restrooms on the 8th floor. 2 in the gym, 2 in the hallway, and a little tiny toilet in the kids' playroom. So you don't have to go home to your apartment to find relief in expression. And so here we sit, standing in conclusion and leaning into consideration from our new ivory tower. As we watch the world spinning below, we gander from above the clouds, spiking the heavens, but respecting the heat of the sun. And knowing the spray of the bay beneath us is waiting for us to wet our wings in anticipation of the great fall. And yet, together, we wonder just how long we can sustain life above the street, after clawing our way up and out of the plaited caliche of our heathen past, to rest momentarily in the gutter before finally finding our stance and our driving mission roiling before us, urging us to lift our eyes skyward toward a darkening horizon and a sun now disappeared in shadow. This is progress. This is how the sky fades. This is what becomes us. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.